yeah, just 2 quick slides. Did you go in depth about Zupu and Zapu?
Just go through it. You probably correct all my mistakes.
But yeah, Zupu and Zapu, they really come in all shapes and sizes. They can be a couple scraps of paper with just a couple names on them, and they can be like 12 volumes covering thousands of pages with names, with ancestral biographies. So especially when ancestors passed imperial examinations, that was really the thing to be proud of as the family. So that's something that you would really highlight in your clan book. Migration history. So for instance, if you were, let's say your family was from Toisan, then where were they before they arrived in Toisan? Because usually most of the people in the south, they came from the north or from central side, Shandong, Henan. And usually the downward movement, population movement, happened with instances of social unrest. So often this was with dynastic changes, from Tang to Song, from Song to Yuan, from Yuan to Ming, etc. The books also often contain clan guidelines, so moral codes to live by, and generation poems. Those are very important. So especially if you haven't found your book yet, it's also an important way to actually find the book. Because if you know, for instance, 3 generations of men in your family, then you can sort of search by generation poem, and then you can see, okay, this is the clan book that belongs to my family or not.
What do you mean by generation poem?
Sure. So here you can see, so these are different generations, 16th, 17th, 18th generation, and like these are ancestors, these are brothers. So this is the generation name. So every generation had one name that was applied to each person, men usually. But so the generation poem was written either by the family elder or it was taken from an existing poem. It was literally a poem, a sequence of characters, often like 25 or 30 or 50 characters long. And every character, consecutive character, was a consecutive generation. So the first character was for the son's generation. The second character was for the grandson's generation, etc., etc. And then when you reach the end, you either start at the beginning or you would choose a new poem.
So by way of explanation, just to make sure everybody's in, the Chinese name generally has 3 characters. First one is usually the surname, right? Then you have the generation name. Yes. And that is, as they're saying, is like, for example, my father's name is Zhang Guoping and Zhang Guojun. My uncle is Zhang Guo something and somebody else. So my name, generation name is Pun, and so my name is Zhang Bang Pun. Then my brother is Zhang Kun something else. Then Zhang Kun something else. So the brothers, you know that the brothers are on of that generation. But your cousins, your first cousins, also have that generation name. So you have a surname and you have a generation name, and by that way you can know which generation you belong to. And that's the generation. That generation name comes from the poem or some other history.
Dad, what's my generation name?
You're one of a kind, Russell.
You're the period.
It's actually
punctuation.
All right, so you did name them. You did use the generation.
My mother.
Okay. Yeah, so my generation's name was just made up by my grandfather because they lost the poem and they.
Can you explain a little bit the difference between a Japu and a Zupu?
Right. Yeah. So there is a theoretical difference. The practical issue is that basically people now use it interchangeably. But if you look at the words, like jia is family, zu, zongzu is clan. So originally the jiapu was more narrow than the zupu. And then you also have the zongpu, which is basically even higher. So it's a higher level, broader tree. But again, I mean, we have many jiapu that are really going wide and are very, yeah, are very large, and we have tupu that are very small. So in practice, it doesn't really make a big difference.
If adoption was in the play, would it
Yeah.
be traceable?
Would it, sorry, would it be, what would it would be?
If there was adoption, would it be traceable? Child
Yeah,
given or
usually so
child-
after the adoption, the child would be part of the new family. If it was a son, then it would be incorporated. Daughters were often not incorporated in the tupu. So, yeah, with adoption cases, you really, what we always do is you have to go back to the village to really get the stories out of people, like the oral histories. In the tupu, it's usually not inclusive.
Even if it was 100 years ago?
Yeah, because very often adoptions happen within families. So it could be a cousin, so it could be within the same surname. It could also be when two clans had relations with each other, that were close with each other, that there was back and forth adoption. So, yeah, it's not necessarily that you will get the answer by asking people, but we have had quite a few cases where we did.
But what about the paper names syndrome, or what, I mean, dilemma?
Yeah, that's essentially also a similar answer, because you can't get a conclusive answer looking at the paper trails. So you have to go, you have to go back and really ask around and see which families had relationships.
So it's the oral history,
It's-
research
yeah.
more?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, do you have experience with?
Well, you know, one thing, and I think you highlighted it very much. Look at this, the gravestone. If normally, you have the paper name, as we all know, practically all of us, or our paper sons or daughters. But if you look for your nationality records or something, there was a period in which they corrected the records. So you still need to research the records. You may be able to figure that out. But invariably, what I found, and maybe your experience is that way, or other people have experienced, if you go to the gravestone, they will use the correct name on that gravestone. And they may write down Yang, but the guy is actually Lei, and the character will be for Lei. They won't put the paper son, part of the paper son's name on it, I find. Anybody else have any other experience with that?
Yeah, it's our real name
On the gravestone, right?
the paper name's not acknowledged.
Yeah.
Well, I'm from San Francisco, and Coma's full. Coma is where all the cemeteries are, and there are at least 3 or 4 Chinese cemeteries. And it's so fun to walk through these, walking around the gravestones, because you'll have the guy's name, Edward Lum, and you know the character for on your head. And then you'll see the Chinese character, and it'll be Wong. And I would say, I don't know, 75 or higher % of those. In other words, by the time you die, you want to have, if you kept your paper name your whole life, you want to die and go to heaven with your real Chinese surname. So it's really cool to see that.
I think also that there's a little bit of, I don't know if the right word is arrogance about it, but you have a paper son because you're trying to poo one over the government, right? Then when you die, you carve your Chinese name in, and you can be sure that that immigration officer is not going to walk by. Figure out that this is.
I got a comment. My mother's father is buried up in Pittsburgh, and when you look at his gravestone, it just has Li Ching and absolutely nothing else. And I was told that because of the immigration scare back in the 50s, the family actually went through there, got rid of the old original tombstone that had all the information and his real name, and just redid it with a paper name only. So, and then if you look for my grandmother, who died many years later, the names are reversed, and nowhere in the cemetery well, they're separate grave sites, but nowhere in the paperwork is there any tying in of grandfather and grandmother. Next time I get up there, I might say something to the staff about putting something in the documents, but, you know,
That's interesting. You know, like in Colma, that Roberta mentioned it, the cemetery is divided among the different clans and so forth, right? So if you're Lum, you're going to be buried from that village area. Say for my group from Huihan, or you're from Toisan, you'll probably have a district area, the section of the cemetery is where you're going to be buried. That's where, you know, your clan or people have bought a space for you. So that's another indicator of, you know, what your real surname is. You're not going to find somebody from Taishan Wong buried in, you know, Taiping something or other.
And Ted, having the right name on the tombstone is also very much a part of the Qing Ming thing. So when you do a ceremony and you petition to the gods of the heavens or hells, whatever, you've got to have the right name, the right village, to make your petition. That's part of the ritual.
So, well, that's because the other slides are basically what we're building, the database that we're building. Maybe just in terms of family histories, yeah. Any other questions or personal experience? Yeah.
Well, my main goal these days, impossible I think, is to find out, find my father's biological family. My father was adopted as a baby, and I didn't find out till he was, you know, passed away a long time ago. The rumor was that he was a stolen Hakka baby. And I don't know how one could ever find that information. He was born in 1922. So the only thing I thought of was like, you know, genes, you know, like if China ever like, you know, revved up their, you know, their equivalent of Ancestry.com, which I think is called WeGene.
Oh, okay.
Then,
DNA.
Yeah, DNA, exactly. Then maybe I could find relatives that way.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably the only way.
Well, you'd still need somebody to cross-check with. Like with DNA, if you want to check if, so you can't just, it's not one-way traffic. You can't just submit your saliva and then see what village you're from. So you need, if you have a suspicion about what village you might be from, you would need basically a saliva swab from somebody from there that might be related to you, and then you can cross-check.
Well, you know, I mean, like, do Hakka, I mean, they don't really, they kind of go from place to place. I mean, do they have Japus?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. Now, Hakka were very proud of their identity, their Hakka identity, so they actually have very extensive Japus. Yeah.
I mean, the concept of stealing a Hakka baby, does that make any sense? I mean, like, were they poor that could steal a baby from them?
Well, Hakka were definitely often poor. They were guest people, right? So they were often poor. I mean, we've come across stories where you're aware of the Haki Punti wars. You had Hakka against basically local Cantonese people. There was a lot of unrest and conflict between the two. Even though Hakka are actually Han, they're also a Han.
Right. Yeah.
Within the Han ethnicity still. But we have had instances where basically families were close, where you had basically Romeo and Juliet stories where two opposing sides, but you had families that were close to each other. So I don't know if that's, obviously I don't know in this particular case.
You know what, can I say one thing about Hakka? They're actually, many people know I was working in Guangdong immigration for many years. So one of the things we used to do was try to ensure who was the fake, who was real relative, and things of this sort. And we would encounter things like adopted sons or real birth sons or daughters. It makes a difference on your ability to apply for the immigration status. So for the Hakka people, we've been able to figure out, or we found out that the Hakka had a tradition, and it's actually supported by some of the Hakka people in Singapore, other people. You have, remember, Hakka were guest workers. I mean, they were a later flow of people that came into the southern part of the Guangdong and Hong Kong and different places. So there were the big wars that was between the long-established Chinese and these new Chinese that were coming in, the Keja, Hakka versus the Bali people, as you Now, and then Hakka moved around quite a bit. They never bound their feet, for example, the women indicate. They're not really that settled, although if you ever have the ability to go to China and go to some of the Hakka areas and you see some of the way their villages are formed, they're really fantastic. And a lot of it reflects some of the fighting, their round buildings or their circular to help protect things. Now, one of the things that I learned from some of the immigration stuff that we were doing is that you have these adopted children all the time in the Hakka family that you don't see so much in the other families. And part of that we learned from sort of talking to people is that in a Hakka situation where you're moving around and you're relying largely on the relationships to the other Hakka people, to reinforce that relationship, I think this is probably the origin of this custom. The elder son of one family would be adopted to the other family, and that family's elder son would be adopted to another family, and that elder son would be adopted out to the other's family. That, I think, sociologically reinforced the identity and the group. But it left for us, who were evaluating immigration stories, these ideas that there was a regular process by which people were adopted out, and later generations will not totally realize it. And then it's long after that need to do that has gone away. But you would see that repeatedly, where the eldest person, daughter or son or somebody, would have been adopted out to another family. That family would have adopted out another family. So that adds to your complication.
I think DNA.
What we also have is basically we found a Japu of somebody we knew wasn't Hakka, but then we looked in depth at the migration history, and it was very clearly a Hakka migration. Because the Hakka migration there were 6 very distinct waves of Hakka migration over the last 2,000 years. And so this was obviously a mystery to be solved. And then we found that it was the Zupu, so that the village of the person that we were helping, they had basically adopted Zupu from the same surname, but a neighboring village that was a Hakka village. And they basically, because their own Tapu was destroyed during the Cultural Revolution, so basically they adopted the Hakka, the common, going very far back into the past, common roots. So it is a bit, there's a lot of grayness in the Hakka versus non-Hakka identity.
Can you address, following up here, the Huihan database?
Oh, yeah.
And whether or not, I mean, there might be people in China who also are looking and the connection could be made?
Yeah, sure. I mean, okay, to follow up, so we'll get to that in a couple of slides, but the short answer is that at this moment, so first of all, the established databases of 23andMe, Ancestry DNA, the data sets that they have on Chinese are too small to deliver a representative sample of the ethnic background. So basically, because we were also looking into DNA, and the person who set up Ancestry DNA is on our strategic advisory board, so he's helping us prepare. But when I was doing market research for this, to set this up, I did like 4 different, I used 4 different DNA companies, and they were all completely different. So, that just means that none of them, can be completely right. Not all of them can be completely right. So, and that's just a matter of volume. There's just not enough Chinese people who have submitted their saliva so that really the conclusions can be drawn. Both ethnic and sub-ethnic populations are from there. So that's, I don't know if this is an answer, but it will take time, and we're preparing for it. Huihan has started.
I mean, you can, like, I did Ancestry, and then I uploaded my results over to Huihan.
Yeah.
Just to see what it would say. And it does, like, break it down, your ethnicity, more than,
Right.
so I'm just setting, like, in Ancestry.com, I'm like 98% Chinese, 2% like Thai.
Right.
And then, the Huihan, it's like, I'm like this much Northern Han, this much Southern Han,
Right. Exactly.
this much Thai.
Yeah.
But what I'm hoping for is Huihan right now doesn't have relative matching.
Right.
And that's what I'm, so if you have any like contacts over at Huihan in Beijing or whatever, say
Yeah,
that, people in the US Chinese people in the US would really like to have relative matching.
Right, right. Yeah, they're in Shenzhen. Yeah, I know that I know quite a lot, there's definitely demand for this. I know that they've received the request, but they just haven't built product.
Isaac was being digitized and searchable, and the reason I ask is because you can do a lot, once you've got the 3-character name of somebody,
Yeah.
there's a lot you can do with Google Translate in terms of searching Chinese databases.
Yes.
And my sense is, I haven't
Yeah.
found the mother lode on those yet.
So let me